This video may contain offensive language and be frightening to some viewers. Viewer discretion is highly advised. Osana the Killer. Osana was always known to be a difficult kid. She was typically bullied in school because of her hair color, or whatever those kids were able to come up with to annoy her. But besides that, Osana was a lovely girl. She was born with heterochromia and had a quite different skin color than most other people. Heterochroma is meaning that her left eye was brown and her right was blue. Besides being a nice person, Osana had a bit of a temper when it comes to people she disliked, and she made very few friends at school. Though she did manage to get one friend. His name was Jeffrey Woods, though he would always just prefer Jeff. They would hang out every day, since Osana tried to stay away from her family as much as possible, except for her little sister Emma. She was the only one in her family who didn't harm her. Her parents, however, they harmed her every day and was abusive. They always harmed her both mentally and physically, which ended up in Osana spending most of her time in her room by herself. She grew cold and non-social. She didn't even really talk to Emma anymore after a few years, which resulted in her also growing cold like her sister. One day, Osana was, of course, at school studying like she always used to, but she was wondering why Jeff didn't show up. He hadn't been in school all day, and she began getting worried. It didn't take her long to realize that maybe he had gotten sick. Maybe it was nothing she should worry about. However, that day ended up becoming weeks, and she still was wondering, where is Jeff? However, soon enough, he came to school again, and of course that made her excited. She got happy, she wanted to hug him all the time and be the good friend that she always is and always was. Little did she know, however, that this day was going to change her life forever. She was going to experience a lot of trauma during the next few years of her life, which would result in her being a violent and non-active person mentally. It would result in mostly her just trying to avoid people as much as possible, or avoid as much contact with them as she could. Not that nothing changed about that, of course. She had always been not social, but this just turned way worse than it was before. So did her parents' abuse, after her dad resulted into being drunk all the time, and her mom just didn't do anything about it. She just sat there and watched. Emma was always too afraid to do anything about this. She was scared she was going to get hurt herself. The main reason why Osana got hurt was because her parents, when she was born, or well, before her mom even became pregnant the first time with Osana, they wanted to have a son. However, they became furious when they found out they were having a daughter, and they were literally trying to get Osana into a state of mind where she would think the jumping off would be the only way to escape this hellhole she literally was in. Osana was the type of person who normally didn't care what others thought of her, but when it came to her parents, she was always obedient. She always wanted to make sure they got the daughter that they wanted, but no matter what she did, they were always disappointed in her. She got high grades and was very kind to almost everyone she met, but still, they just didn't seem like they even wanted her. They often called her things like a failure, a mistake, which results in her mentality slowly breaking apart. And that would end up being a backstab towards their parents later on down the line. Osana grew older, and when she turned 13, that's when she received what would change her life forever. Her parents became way more abusive than before. They now would use and spend like 50% of their day not letting her go to school, but just letting her stay home and beating her as much as they could. 4 times a month, she must have gone to the hospital because of all the bruises she got. It was as if she even ended up giving up and even fighting back. To her parents, at least. The fact that she was known to be a difficult kid didn't change at all by the fact of how many fights she got into at school. And no, I'm not speaking of fights with the teachers, but fights with the students. Brutal and physical fights. She got into them. A lot of them. This one time she resorted in a kid having to go to the hospital with massive injuries and probably even bad enough for him to having to be sleeping at the hospital in order to get them fixed. It didn't take Osana long enough to realize that maybe what she was doing was wrong. Maybe it just wasn't worth it. Maybe she was thinking way too much of it. She stopped hurting people for a short while, and then one day, that's when she had enough and ended up snapping completely, resulting in her doing some things that you normally would say that's normally what only a psychopath would do. People say she was getting mentally unstable way too fast now, and she was directly becoming a psychopath and insane. They said she was losing her mind, and they said if they didn't do anything about it, they might lose her. But her parents just didn't care. And then the day came. Wait, what? You can't be serious, Osana cried, looking at Jeff. He looked to the floor with a sad expression on his face. It sadly is, he said, messing a bit around in his brown, fluffy hair. You can't be moving away. Osana was only 13 at the time. She began crying and nearly begging. She really just couldn't help but start to cry, a little bit, not wanting to lose her friend, her only friend. The friend that promised he would never leave her, ever. And now what was he doing? He was leaving her. At least that's how she said it. She didn't have a phone at the time, so it was not even like she could call him at any time soon. He sighed, apologizing and reminding her that it wasn't her fault. And of course, she was aware of that. 100%. But she knew deep inside that it would just not be the same without him, and she might end up being even more broken and going into a way more depressing state than she already was. She had never told Jeff about her parents' abuse. She didn't see a reason to. She didn't see any reason to tell anybody. And she was even starting to question if waking up in the morning was even worth it anymore. A few days later, that was the day Jeff had to move. Osana got out of her house and went over to hug him goodbye. They both were crying, of course, knowing they would miss each other so dearly much. They just couldn't bear the fact of being away from each other. Jeff hugged her and handed her something in her hand and folded them together. When she opened her hands again, she saw a necklace, a golden and black necklace. He gave it to her as a goodbye gift and smiled softly. "I promise, Osana, I'll visit you whenever I can." She nodded, knowing he wasn't joking, and then hugged him goodbye. Jeff got into the car and looked back, seeing Osana waving goodbye at him as he and the car disappeared down the road. It would be many years later before Osana saw him again. Later on down the line, when Osana was about 14, 1 year later, that was when things began taking a turn for the worst. Osana began not only growing more distant towards other people, such as her family especially, but she also began getting into way more fights at school than usual. Began even going up against the 9th graders, those who were older than her and stronger in almost every way. The fights became more brutal, and even sometimes one or more people would have to go to the hospital with intense bruises, and they would all claim that it was all because of the same exact person. Osana had also been in a relationship. However, she had broken up with her boyfriend because of the way he treated her. He treated her just like her parents treated her, like an object and a piece of shit. They ended up just stop abusing her for a short while, her parents, because they thought that she actually just needed a small break. That's what they said to her, at least. She never believed them. She always thought, small break? Yeah, right. I don't believe in that shit. Osana would always try to forget Jeff, but she just couldn't. It was as if something was pulling onto her, making her not forget him, and making her just not move on. It was as if she just couldn't. And she wore the necklace that she got that day from him, every single day. One day, Osana heard in the news about a new serial killer on the loose. Ominous unknown killer is still at large. That's what it says in the newspapers. Osana didn't really read it though, but she couldn't really care less. Because another serial killer, another criminal in this filthy world, she thought to herself. She didn't see the point of why people would even care about such things. I mean, yeah, sure, people would die, but it wasn't people she knew. Not yet, at least. Osana didn't really have any fear of losing any family members, since she knew that they didn't really care for her. She always thought, if they don't care about me, why should I care about them? She was always like that towards almost everyone except for her friends, those friends who stayed with her. And it really just ended up ruining her as a person, slowly and mentally painful. One day, Osana was sitting in her room, like always. She had just broken up with her boyfriend because of the way he treated her, literally like an object, just because of her big of her a little bit big chest, and just the way she looked in general. He treated her like an object and not like an actual person, so she had enough and broke up with him. Osana looked out the window, and eventually she got up and went downstairs and made sure to be as quiet as possible, and made sure that she wasn't being noticed by her mother or her father. Then she took her red hoodie and got out of the house and began walking down the dark street. It was very late at night, and the sun had already gone down. The stars weren't quite up in the sky yet. She looked around at the lighthouses, and she sighed in disappointment, knowing she wasn't there to spend time with anyone except for Emma. Suddenly, 3 girls from her school approached her. She had no idea where they came from. She had no idea why they even were there. They didn't even live in that neighborhood. And they instantly began bullying and teasing her. The oldest of the girls was a girl from her class named Erica. Erica had always took Osana as a target, and had always seen her as an easy prey, and an easy person that she could just break whenever she wanted. Osana had enough of that, though. Osana got so irritated to the point where she ended up made them being quiet by suddenly hitting one of the girls right in the stomach full force, causing her to cough up blood. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Erica yelled at Osana, before also being hit right in the nose, causing it to bleed uncontrollably. Osana looked up at her own blood-covered hands and smiled. For some twisted reason, she liked the idea of hurting someone back who had hurt her in the past or still would. She didn't see it as unusual. Or, well, of course she kinda did. Though she found some satisfaction in hurting others. She didn't quite understand why. It had always been there, but now it was just intense. Way more intense than it had ever been. And so, the girls got up while she wasn't paying attention, and then they attacked her. Osana screamed and struggled as she tried to get Erica off of her, but she couldn't move. Osana was pinned down to the ground and ended up kicking Erica straight in the stomach, getting her off of her. She then grabbed a rock that was laying close to her hand and threw it at Erica and the other girls. They screamed and cried, but still it didn't stop attacking her. They just kept going. No matter how hard Osana tried to escape, she just couldn't. And she ended up doing something way more violent. With one of the girls' wrists, she took it and broke it, and ended up literally causing one of the other girls to pass out by slamming her head so hard into the ground until it began bleeding. Osana didn't stop there, though. She didn't care anymore. She loved the satisfaction of the blood on her hands, and she just couldn't stop. It wasn't until she noticed police cars that she began running, leaving the 3 girls there unconscious. The police didn't manage to get to her to see that she was the attacker, though, and the girls didn't remember anything from when they woke up. They didn't remember what happened or anything. They were just curious what really happened to them. And of course, Osana didn't mention it at all during the next days of school. However, she did do something a little more quite different. She ended up, of course, keeping it hidden, but she couldn't stop feeling and thinking about what she had just done. Then she came to some more gruesome thoughts. She began thinking of that killer she had heard on the news again. What was it his signs were known for? He was known for having really pale skin and a smile caught into his cheeks. What was it they called him? Oh yeah, Jeff the Killer. Whenever she heard the name Jeff, she of course associated it with her old friend. But at that time she thought, of course, it's not him. There's no way that's him. Jeff would never kill anyone. I mean, sure, he can be a bit violent sometimes, but he wouldn't kill anyone. Would he? Then she began thinking of the thoughts of, what if I ended up killing someone? She just couldn't get those thoughts out of her head even though she wanted to. And it was kind of scaring herself. She didn't know what else to do, so as soon as she got home, she threw her backpack and just laid on her bed and fell asleep, trying to forget the day's events that have happened. The fun part is, Erica and the others didn't bother Osana anymore. They didn't hurt her, they didn't even walk up to her after what happened, because now they were officially scared of her. However, Osana's parents hadn't stopped abusing her, and it was starting to piss her off. But soon, Osana's sanity began to break. And that's when, one day while being in a fight with her parents, that's when she lost it. She began having massive headaches and just getting the sudden urge again to hurt them. So what she did next, she had forgotten to this day, but she went late at night to the kitchen. She took a knife. First, she went back upstairs, making sure Emma was deep asleep, closed the door, then went back downstairs into the bathroom. She wanted to fulfill her lust for blood once and for all, so she took the knife and then cut out her left eye. She was tired of having two different colors eyes. She wanted to only have one. She wanted to be normal. Then, after that, her mom suddenly came into the bathroom to see what she was doing. Oh, hey mother. What's wrong? Oh, that. I didn't scare you, did I? Osana smiled. No, sweetie, of course not. Why are you doing this? Osana smiled, still holding the blood-filled knife in her hand, slowly walking towards her mother. Just because I want to be normal. That's all she said. Then, while approaching her mother, she just kept smiling. Osana's mom just said, let me go get your father real quick. I'll be right back, sweetie. Then she ran in, tried to waking Osana's father, but he didn't wake up before 5 minutes later. He woke up and asked, honey, what's wrong? That's when Osana's mom broke out in panic, telling everything that's been going on, calling Osana a complete psycho, a psychopath, an insane person. She was just about to tell him to call the police when there she was, standing in the doorway to the living room, holding the blood-filled knife in her hand and bandages covering her left eye. She stood there smiling, looking at them. Oh, so you're scared of me now? She smiled. Her parents were just about to call the cops when suddenly Osana jumped on them, attacking them, first killing her mother. Then, she jumped on top of her father, ready to plunge her knife into his chest and into his still beating heart. Why are you doing this? Her dad cried. Why? Well, why do you think, dear father? She smiled. Her father looked at her with fear. Then he just said, "You're insane. You're completely insane. You've lost your mind." That's when she smiled at him, again, with the same insane look that she used to do to those girls that she hurt. She gave him the look and said, "Insane? So I'm the insane person now? You were the one who's been abusing me for all of these years, Father. How can I be the insane person?" She laughed psychotically and then lifted up her knife and plunged it into her father's still beating heart. Looking down into his eyes while he was trying to struggle to breathe, while he was choking on his own blood, she smiled. And then she said, "Father, listen to me. I am not an insane person. I am not a psychopath. I am just getting rid of evil. And I am just getting rid of the people who hurt me." She then began stabbing her father again and again and again until he was dead. Then she ran out of the house, and then she didn't set it on fire because she didn't want her sister to get hurt. She ran out of the house, into the forest, and then she met Jeff. That was the last time anyone had ever seen of Osana, until recently, into the news. Osana had been discovered, and now she was a proxy of Slenderman. And who knows what she might do to people.